Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we're going to share Yeti encounter horror stories. First story. She vanished in the forest surrounding Netherland, Colorado. Like poof gone. It makes no sense, and I'm getting no sleep because I can't stop thinking about what it might mean. Either everything we know about the nature of reality is wrong, or I'm losing my goddamn mind. But that's impossible, because I'm not the only witness. Both of my buddies saw it too, and both have been trying to forget they did. Me, though, I can't. It basically shattered my world and shook the very foundation I stand on to navigate this crazy thing called life. I was a staunch skeptic before this all happened, and now I'm not so sure. And that terrifies me. It happened a few days ago while we were out hiking the backcountry near Ned. It happened slow, with a series of increasingly odd events that led up to us seeing her vanish. I'm still in a daze, and I still haven't told anyone about this. I've barely even talked to my friends since it happened. I still don't know what happened. We left late, when the sun was just beginning its descent towards the jagged layers of the Rockies. It was a play-it-by-ear kind of day. We had nothing else to do, and wanted to hike something other than the Flatirons and Chautauqua. Something relatively close. So, Netherland it was. Now, I was born and bred in Colorado, and I've always felt strangely drawn to the mountains and the forests and the solitude. I loved it, and I was used to it, and that special kind of silence you can only really find in the mountains never scared me. But this drive up was different. I was scared, terrified, really, and as I looked out the passenger side window at the rocks and the trees, it felt like there was something or somethings watching me back. But I kept my mouth shut and ignored my gut. I thought I was being ridiculous. Besides, neither of my friends seemed scared. And yet, I swear that right before we parked at the empty trailhead, something was running through the trees next to the road, barely visible. It was ghostly pale, and had strange, elongated limbs, and it was fast. But I blinked and it was gone. I figured it was just a result of pareidolia or something and shrugged it off. The entire hike up there was great. The weather was great. The forest great. And yet there was still this feeling of dread dripping deep in my gut that I couldn't shake. It freaked me out, and I kept glancing around us, trying to hide my panic with laughter. I can't explain it, but I expected to see eyes watching us, stalking us, and a few times I could have sworn I did, but when I looked back, there was nothing there. We reached the top, and it was magnificent. We were totally surrounded by trees and covered by sky. It was like we were standing inside a giant fractal, and I guess in a way we were. Fear forgotten, I took a deep breath, released it, and opened my eyes expecting to see the setting sun. Plop! I looked up confused. The sky was bruised and roiling, about to burst. None of us had seen the thunderhead roll in. It must have blown in fast. It was almost like it appeared out of nowhere. We hesitated, not knowing how bad it'd be. But as thunder cracked overhead and a few more fat drops fell around us, we decided we'd better leave, and quickly. We didn't even make it 3 feet before the storm hit us. The rain was coming down heavy, sideways, blurring out vision, making the trail back slick and treacherous. We didn't want to chance it, and there's a saying in Colorado, if you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. So we hunkered down and attempted to wait it out. 30 minutes later, it was still going strong, and we were just beginning to move to higher ground when suddenly, as quickly as it came, the rain was gone, and the sun was shining bright and warm against our faces. It was higher up in the sky than I remembered, and I was in the act of pointing that fact out when there was a high-pitched screech, and we all stopped dead in our tracks. What the shit was that? Is that smoke? Was that a car horn? Is that someone screaming? Holy look! At first, I didn't see it, but then I did. It was a car, completely totaled, smashed between the trees. The entire front end was crushed against a pine, which was halfway uprooted. The window of the door behind the driver was totally gone, like someone had broken it. and the driver's side door was wide open, hanging by one hinge. No smoke was coming up from the busted part of the engine, but the back left wheel was still slowly rotating. We walked towards it in total disbelief and soon saw that there was no one in the car or in the surrounding area. One of my buddies stooped down for a second and held up a small, shiny card, a driver's license. Address says she lives in Golden. How the hell did her car get all the way up here? For a moment, I thought he was asking why someone from Golden would come up to Nederland, and was just about to reply when I realized that he was actually asking how her car got all the way out here, in the middle of the woods. The lack of roads wasn't even the problem. It was the space. Her car simply could not have made it through the trees, and from the way it was positioned between them, it looked like someone had picked it up and placed it there. I closed my mouth and I said nothing, drawn toward the open door. I couldn't help myself. I'm a curious person. I walked right up to it and peered inside. It looked like someone left in a hurry, cutting off the seatbelt with a jagged knife and leaving all their belongings behind. On the passenger's seat was a Joseph Campbell book. I picked it up and something fluttered out of the pages. A picture used as a bookmark. It was of a little girl and a big white horse with a gentle face. I flipped it over and read the writing on the back. Sweet horse. Look, I dropped the book and picture back inside the car and turned around. My friend was pointing towards something out in the trees behind the car. There was a splash of bright colors against the neutral tone of the forest, and I saw the girl leaning against the trunk of the tree. She was so close I could see blood running down her head, into her face and eyes. Hey, are you okay? But she either didn't hear my friend or was ignoring him and pushed herself straight from the trunk. The look on her face was of sheer terror, and she reached her arm out, pointing at something we couldn't see beyond the trees in front of her. Oh God, help me. Please don't let it take me. Please. She half turned and staggered forward a few steps, almost like she finally saw us and was reaching out for help. And then, boom, nothing. She was gone, just vanished right before our eyes. And I swear that when she disappeared, I heard a sound like a door slamming. Boom. But why would there be a door in the middle of woods? We stood frozen, debating if we should go over and see if she had fallen or what, when we heard it. A low, guttural moan from the direction the girl had vanished, and then a sharp sound, unnatural to the forest around us. Click! I swear you could feel the fear thick on the air as we looked around, trying to see what had made that noise. And then I saw it peeking out at us from behind the exact place the girl had vanished. A small, humanoid face with beady black eyes and a too small mouth turned down in a contemplative frown. It ducked back behind a tree. Beside me, one of my friends gasped and turned away swiftly, ready to run. Let's go. My other buddy urged, tugging on the straps of my backpack. We turned and booked it down the mountain, slipping and sliding in the mud, but not stopping. Behind us was the sound of pursuit. Someone was definitely running, crashing through the trees behind us, but not close enough to catch us. It was like they were playing a game. We didn't stop until we made it to the trail marker and map we passed at the beginning of the hike. The forest was quiet again, and the sun was back low, like that run down took us twice as long as usual. Like we lost time. We staggered out of the tree line, and the first thing I saw was the bright orange plastic siding of a dirt bike. Mud streaked the sides of it, and a black helmet was on the seat. Hey, what the hell are you doing, man? The anger in my buddy's voice startled me, and I shifted my glance over to the only other vehicle there, ours. A guy, wearing black cargo pants and a faded Dio shirt, was crouched by the side of it. Looked like he was fiddling with the back left tire. My friend Jack was next to the guy, and leaning on the rear bumper was another tire. You had a flat. Changed it for you. Thought you might be in a hurry. Job already done. He stood, threw the jack and the busted tire back into my friend's trunk, and closed it. He looked over at us, sweaty and panicked and rushed, nodded once, and said something I'll never forget. "You saw it." I knew he wasn't asking a question, but I answered anyway. "Why, yeah," I said breathlessly. "Shit," he said, looking up and off into the distance behind us, at the trees and the door. For a moment there was silence, and then I heard my own voice bubbling out of me, unstoppable. I heard close. The guy opened his mouth to reply, but my friend cut him off, clearly at his wit's end. "What is even going on? And how did you get into my car?" The guy opened his palms in a conciliatory gesture and said, "Look, I can expo," but a series of loud, rapid booms echoed down the mountainsides and towards us, drowning him out. At first I thought they might be bombs until I realized that what it really sounded like was someone banging on a door, trying to get out or in. The guy stood, mouth half opened, head cocked to the side, listening. And then a voice on the wind, a strange voice, like several people speaking at the same time. "Don't talk to strangers." "Oh," he finally exclaimed before suddenly running over to the dirt bike, slamming on the helmet, and ripping out it fast as he could go towards the direction we had come from. What's happening?" "Your guess is as good as mine." "Can we go, though?" Like, seriously? We piled into the car and made the winding way back down to Boulder in silence. And, like I said, I haven't really talked with my buddies since. Don't really know what to say. They don't seem too keen on talking about it either. There's been nothing on the news about the car, or a missing girl, or anything weird or spooky happening up in Netherlands. And how do you casually bring up an experience like that to anyone? Even good friends? I know one person who might believe me, though, my sister. She has this story, this crazy story about this time she went camping when I told her not to go. Anyway, she insists this random guy in a black suit saved her life. I didn't believe her at all before, and now I do. Now I believe. And I mean, he wasn't wearing a suit, but who knows, maybe the guy we saw, maybe it was the same guy. Second story, winter and construction. If you're from the Midwest region of the United States, you know there are two seasons, winter and construction. Once the temperature is regularly above 50 degrees Fahrenheit, the road crews start to repair the roads from the long, often snowy winter. I was stuck out at my dad's house in rural Illinois. I had lost my job a few months back and been forced to move in with family until I was able to save up my money. Unfortunately, the job I had secured was about an hour commute without traffic. When construction season began, my commute extended by a half hour. When they found structure problems in one of the bridges into St. Louis, my commute became a 2-hour trek. 2 hours of driving was ridiculous. I turned to Google Maps to find a better way. The first day was not too bad. I looked over the meandering route composed of mostly back roads until I got to the Belleville/East St. Louis area. I have a terrible sense of direction, but the route to the office seemed to backtrack on several of the twists and turns. I didn't see many other cars on the road, which was fairly typical of county highways and roads that were barely wide enough for one car. I got to work in about an hour and a half. Not ideal, but still better than taking the main roads. It rained that night. Not only did it ruin my plans to watch the ETA Aquarius meteor shower, but big drops hammered my father's modular home, keeping me awake much longer than I planned. Loud claps of thunder rattled the windows and woke me several times through the night. I was going to need a lot of coffee to get me to work in the morning, and I started worrying about washed-out roads. I got up early, anticipating that my commute may take 2 hours again due to water on the roads. After downing half a pot of coffee, I put the other half in my Yeti and started up Google Maps. It looked like my route would be the same as the previous day, but I was skeptical. The Kaskaskia River was already high before the storm, and I zoomed out to look at different routes. The other two routes displayed on my screen were 20 and 35 minutes longer. I resigned myself to taking back roads again, even though I was worried about unmarked detours. I turned onto the first county highway. The ditches weren't as full of water as I feared, and I was happy that I could have at least a few miles of paved road before worrying about a detour. Google Maps surprised me by asking me to make a left turn onto a single-lane road with no name. It was paved, but I didn't see any power lines going that way. As someone who has been driving on rural roads my whole life, it made me concerned. Roads that led somewhere usually had power lines. I knew I was coming up to the Kaskaskia River, so this might be the detour I was dreading. My commute shortened by 10 minutes when I made the turn. Google Maps told me that I needed to drive another 12 miles to reach the state highway that would take me to the interstate. The road continued to twist and turn, but I noticed that I wasn't going through any intersections. That was odd. The road was no longer paved. There were still no power lines. Goldenrod and Queen Anne's lace grew thick in a field to my left, dense woods to the right. I kept an eye on the woods. White-tailed deer tended to jump out at the most inopportune moments. A rusty road sign, faded almost to white from the elements, announced a right curve ahead. I slowed to about 20 miles per hour and tapped my horn 3 times. If there was oncoming traffic, I wanted to make sure they knew I was coming, and I was concerned that the thick trees and brush would hide my tiny economy car from any oncoming traffic. A large movement caught my eye in the woods. I slammed my car to a stop, concerned there were deer about to bound into the roadway. The woods went silent. I looked at the road ahead of me and noticed it curved into the woods. Some deep, primal instinct screamed that I shouldn't go forward. This wasn't the first time my anxiety had spiked on a country road. The feeling of isolation when you don't see another car or human for miles can play tricks on your mind. This, however, felt different. I stared at the woods, trying to figure out what I had seen out of the corner of my eye earlier. I backed up about 30 yards, giving plenty of space for any cars that might come speeding around the hairpin curve, and turned my car off. If I turned around, I would definitely be late for work. If I was going to go listen to Google, I was going to need to calm myself down a bit. There was no need to have a panic attack in the middle of the woods. 5 minutes passed. Every time I reached up to start my car again and start driving, the hair would stand up on my arms. 10 minutes passed, and I picked up my phone to call my boss and let her know I would be late. I noticed that the state highway was less than 2 miles down the road. Just as I was about to make the call, a truck passed on my left. I decided that I would just follow the truck into the woods, and that would help my anxiety. I started up my car and put it into drive, trying not to let too much space between myself and the truck. The truck bounced on the road and disappeared around a second curve. The gravel gave way to mud. I was concerned about getting stuck, but I figured I could just tail the truck and turn around if the road got too messy. It was only 2 miles. I slowed and took the second curve. A bright orange trucker cap and single rubber boot caught my eye on the side of the road. This must be a popular dumping area, I thought, as the side of the road was littered with more debris, mostly clothing, shoes, and car parts. I felt the ground under the car shift, and I braked once more, concerned that I would end up in the ditch as my car spun around, sloshing in the mud. When I came to a stop, the truck was visible in my rearview mirror. Something about the size of a bull mastiff was beating on the windshield. Whatever it was difficult to look at. Something about it was wrong. The thing was covered in too many legs, and it moved like it couldn't decide if it were a fish or an insect or something worse. I thought of scrolling through ad-filled articles boasting the world's top 10 weirdest animals. Its skin exoskeleton was clearly tough enough to crack through to the terrified occupants of the truck. The shadows played tricks on my eyes. No matter how I looked at it, I couldn't decide what color it was. Blue? Brown? Gray? I felt nauseous and my eyes unfocused as the sting of involuntary tears brought my mind and my vision back into focus. The old man in the driver's seat was screaming. I held my breath as he reached in front of his passenger, a woman I assumed was his wife, to grab something out of the glove box. The screaming man discharged a handgun into the nightmare, emptying the clip. An otherworldly scream came from the creature, and a second monstrosity snaked into the bed and headed to the back of the cab, scraping its segmented limbs on the back window, trying to get to the two people in the truck. I didn't need to stick around to see anything more. I eased on the gas, trying not to get stuck in the mud. I slid my small car as fast as I could around the curves. As I exited the last curve, I overshot my exit from the woods and my car slid into the field. Some sort of goo splattered the passenger side windows, and I heard a few loud, wet popping noises. A smaller, underdeveloped version of whatever was probably going to eat me in the next 30 seconds bounced over my windshield as I heard another loud pop and exited the field. I drove as fast as I could, looking for power lines to follow and trying to dial 911. I took a screenshot of Google Maps to make sure I knew where to send the cops. My phone finally connected to 911, and I found a paved road and parked. As the cars flew by, I waited for the police and wrote this down for you all. I gave an approximate location of the creatures to the authorities. Black smoke is curling up in the direction I just came from, and I can only assume they're burning the field and woods that held whatever attacked that truck. Plus. It's almost my bedtime, and I'm still stuck on the side of the road. My boss is furious, and I'm not sure I have a job tomorrow. Hell, I'm not sure I'm going to be available to work tomorrow. I couldn't tell her what actually happened. I guess I could always ask the CDC for a doctor's note. See what I did there? And I feel really guilty about leaving the couple in the truck. I don't think I could have done anything for them. That thing didn't seem to slow down for a handgun. It called in reinforcements. I just don't think I'm ever going to lose the memory of two people getting monster murdered. I think it's something that stays with you. I certainly don't plan on sleeping anytime soon. The CDC impounded my goo-covered car, and I'm waiting to do more interviews with law enforcement. I overheard one of the CDC guys talking with a man in a suit, maybe the FBI. They were talking about meteor showers and a creature that could breathe nitrogen and communicate and view the world via radio waves. Cell phones, GPS, and nearly all other forms of communication run on radio waves. We send radio waves to space. Who knows what's listening out there? If you're reading this at home or work, you're probably on Wi-Fi. Guess what? Wi-Fi uses radio waves. The more I think about it, the more I know we're all. Don't use your GPS if you're in Southern Illinois. Avoid backroads. Don't trust what your phone is telling you. I nearly lost my life to something indescribable. I don't know what's happening, but I know that it feels like the beginning of the end. I can't stop thinking about the creatures, and I swear I hear a humming in my head that wasn't there before. Some of the men in suits are waving me over to their SUV. I assume to take me to the closest police station for interviews. Good luck. Third story, the Yeti of the Mammakus. One of the best things about New Zealand is that there is no animal in the bush that can hurt you, so you're meant to tramp around the forest at night all you want and not get mauled. Anyway, two of my mates decide to go spotlighting for deer in the Mamaku forest near Rotorua. They are avid hunters, been hunting since like 10 years old at least. It's a bit of a drive, and they lock the forest gate at night, so the plan was to camp in the forest. The locals occasionally take their unwanted dogs up there, tie them up along the side of the road, and shoot them, which is spooky to me. That's why I'm mentioning it. I think people also drop dead animals off the side of the road as a pig dump to get the wild pigs to come to the road to feed, gives the pig dog some tracks to follow. Anyway, they had been hunting, didn't get anything, were parked up along the road and decided to hit the hay, set up a tent or whatever to sleep in. Before they got to sleep, however, they started to hear this horrible noise from some kind of animal, like a growling / rasping / bellowing noise, calling out from the darkness of the bush every couple of seconds. The kind of noise it made was something neither of them had ever heard before in the bush, and sometimes these guys walk for days to hunting spots or get dropped in by chopper to remote areas, so they've spent many, many nights in the bush. It wasn't even during the roar, mating season, when the deer roar. They lay there trying to figure out what kind of animal it was, and the noise got louder and closer. It dawned on them that the noise being made could not be from a deer or a pig or even a human, because the noise was so loud/strange that the lungs driving the noise had to be larger than any animal they could think of that would be in the bush. They could hardly even describe/recreate the noise. It was so strange. At this point, they were starting to get freaked out. They loaded the gun back up and decided to see if they could find the source of the noise. They started to track towards it, one person holding the gun, the other with the spotlight. Unfortunately, the bush towards the noise was too thick, which cut down their visibility to like 5, maybe 10 meters. This would obviously present a tactical disadvantage if the thing decided to charge them through the bush. So they ended up tracking back through the bush to road. The noise still didn't stop, so they were like this and slept in a car with the gun loaded. I think eventually the noise stopped and they were able to get some sleep, got up in the morning, and came home. To this day, they have been unable to think of any animal in NZ that could produce such a noise. Fourth story. I was a leader of an Antarctic expedition. This is why I am never returning. I am a researcher and explorer working for a U.S. government-funded geological institute. I won't tell you the name of the institute, but you know it's legit anyway, so I'll give you the old name. AIGS, the American Institute for Geographical Studies. I was a bit of a celebrity in the lab for both good and bad reasons. Let's start with the good. I was the very definition of the phrase, "Don't judge a book by its cover," in human form. I was a big, muscular man with a very ferocious voice, but I was also competent and knowledgeable enough to help my colleagues with all their research. What I'm about to tell you is why I'm famous for all the wrong reasons. A year ago, we sent an expedition of 10 people to the U.S. station in Antarctica to study the ecosystem. Mr. Jackson, the director of the station at the time, told me a few days later that the expedition from our lab had arrived and was doing well, which was good news. For 3 days, we were able to communicate with the expedition using a radio. So once we had the information from the researchers, we could theorize and discuss with them how to write papers or reports to government officials that would benefit the United States. 7 days after their arrival, we were tidying up the lab, knowing that they would be back in 3 days and preparing to have a celebration party for them afterwards. That night, we received some worrying news. The people at the Arctic base told us that some of our researchers, our very own, had not returned when they were supposed to, and that there were now only 5 of them. It was very bad news that they were missing in Antarctica. Especially at night, a death sentence, even if you were armed to the teeth, in the snow, in storms, in the freezing cold. And so they said that if they didn't come back by tomorrow, they would send an expedition to search for them. Hoping they would come, we left the station and went home for the night. The next day, when I arrived first at the Institute, I immediately put in a call to the Antarctic base. And they told us that the researchers were still missing, and that they had now sent out a search party and were searching a 10-mile circle around the area where they were heading. That was the last we heard from the U.S. Antarctic base. For 2 days, we called the Antarctic base at all hours, but all we got back was silence. Only now did we realize that something serious had happened, but we couldn't just sit here and do nothing. Soon a search party was sent from our side, a search party of which I was the captain. There were 9 of us in total, and we were given 7 days to investigate the Antarctic. We were warned that if we didn't return to the States or hear from them after 7 days, we would be declared missing, meaning we had to return in 7 days. With that in mind, our ship landed on the shores of the Arctic. As soon as we arrived there, we had come to realize just how cold the place was despite being in the middle of the day. Average temperature of minus 50 degrees Celsius. A single padding or a winter coat was not enough for it. Luckily for us, We were prepared for this situation. We all wore a sweatshirt, a polo shirt, and padding, and all were given a hot pack that could be used to warm ourselves. All we needed to be careful of now was the danger of the Antarctic. Once the ship reached land, we grabbed as much gear as we could and headed for the Antarctic base where the missing expedition had gone, about 5 hours from where we had arrived. We arrived at South Pole at 11 o'clock. The plan was to follow the tips given to us by the base before the expedition disappeared, have lunch at a makeshift hut about 2 hours away from our arrival point, and arrive at the main base at about 5 o'clock. In Antarctica, every minute can mean the difference between life and death, so we started moving right away. This is where I felt the fear. You have to walk for 2 hours, but you have to carry 50 kilograms of packs per person. Very grueling conditions from the start. At first, it was easy to walk in the first few minutes. We encouraged each other, cheered each other on, and marched on. After half an hour, no one talks. Even opening your mouth saps your energy, so it's very scary to march in silence for an hour. As the leader of the expedition, I led the way, and the only relief was to hear the breathing of my companions behind me. And as soon as it got quiet, or if I couldn't hear them, I wanted to look behind me. But I couldn't look behind me, because if I stopped pacing, it would take a lot of time to get pacing again. After an hour or so, 20 minutes of silence was starting to get punctuated by a grumpy exclamation from one of the researchers. Is it the sound of death or pain? I didn't know, but I kept walking. Another few minutes of silence passed, and then I broke the silence. Right in front of me, I saw a forest. I don't know if it had a mind of its own, but the path was essentially one, pointing to our next destination. There should be a cabin over there. The words were encouraging, and the men began to move quickly. And as we approached the forest, fortunately there was no danger of the wilderness, nor was there any sign of it. We continued onward, and suddenly there was a downhill slope. As we descended into the woods, we found ourselves between a ravine and between diverging paths. Walking slowly at the lowest point, we suddenly saw something in front of us, something that looked like it had fallen, but it wasn't. It was a rock. Several rocks were embedded in the ground. "Let's take a break over there," said one of the expedition members. But he changed his mind when we got near the rock. There was blood on the rock. One rock was ominous enough, but all the rocks had blood on them. And not just a little, but a lot. The feeling of dread returns. What the hell is going on? Is it animal blood? I don't know. The blood is frozen, but not so frozen that it hasn't been there a long time. This blood is at least from yesterday. And most of all, the blood is on the rock, but only on the upper part of the rock, not anywhere else. If the expedition that went first or the expedition from the unsignaled base had hunted, killed an animal, and dismantled it on this rock, there would have been blood on the other side of the rock. No, it was only on the top of the rock. And the second thing that's curious is that this pattern of blood on the top is not just one rock, it's all of them. All the blood we saw was all on the top. Only now did I realize that something was ominous, that these were not animal blood, these were human tracks, and that the only people who would pass through here would be former expedition members or researchers from the Antarctic station, believing that there must be a human body around here. I had the expedition scavenge around. No body, no other bloodstains. Suddenly feeling worse, we decided not to rest on this rock and headed for the hut. Luckily, when we got over the hill, we saw the hut and the door was open. The hut was warm compared to the outside, but it was no place for a person to live without a jacket. So I sat down to eat, and while the rest of the expedition took an hour's rest, I explored the hut. The wooden cabin had windows everywhere, so even though there was no fire, the sunlight lit up the whole place. There was no toilet, and there were no survival items in the storeroom, except for harpoon and other hunting tools. After a long hallway, I opened the door to the last room, which contained an unexpected item. Photographs were tacked up all over the place, apparently souvenirs of explorers who had stopped by. And in the center of the room was a human corpse. It was a shock. This man I knew, he was part of the expedition we sent, and he was the leader of the first expedition I sent encouragement to before they left. My shock must have been felt by the rest of the expedition because one by one, they entered the room where their dead comrade was. The body was not stiff. However, it was cold even for a corpse. It was the temperature that may have caused his body to be as cold as you could imagine. Scavenging around the area, we started searching for things that might have given his final moments, and when it was his final moments. We started examining the clothes if there was some information, and came to a map, which might have been useful for us, and a name tag from our institute. By the looks of it, the cabin we entered was in the middle of the forest, and the Arctic base we were heading to was located as much as the distance we have covered so far. Another 2 hours of walking was set there. Aside from that, nothing was wrong about the map. Hasn't it for the fact there was this written behind it? The devil has killed us. If I was ever going to feel fear in a single sentence in my life, it would be now. The devil killed us. This is in The Conjuring Part 3. Given everything that has happened since we arrived in Antarctica, we knew what our next goal was. We had to find out why this creepy sentence was written. We needed to know what had happened, what had led to the death of our colleagues. We decided to collect the body of our colleague in the hut when we returned later to bury him in his hometown. We put our clothes back on and headed outside. The warmth that had been in the house for an hour vanished as soon as we stepped outside, and a sharp wind greeted us this time. It felt like the whole of Antarctica was laughing at us, insulting us, mocking us. Back on the road again. The forest began to darken with trees, and after a short walk from the hut, I could see the road was going uphill. Normally, the climb would have been nothing, but after everything that had happened in Antarctica, I was afraid to climb. But I'm the leader of this expedition, and if I'm scared, this expedition is doomed to fail. And in Antarctica, failure is death. We must climb against all odds. 20 minutes later, it began to snow, flakes drifting with the wind, covering everything in white. A whiteout situation. It was a very dangerous situation because we could get lost, but this is Antarctica. It's wilderness, and there are animals that do not have sight but have a great sense of smell, and if they are here, they will eat us. It's scary, but we can't stop here. Forward, I said, and for 10, 20, 30 minutes we walked in the white world. Heaven is represented in the media as a white world, but what we see in front of us doesn't remind me of heaven. This is hell. Antarctica is hell. After 40 minutes, the whiteout lifted, and when it did, I was relieved to see what was in front of me. There, right in front of us, was our final destination. The only problem was that we would have to walk for another 2 hours to cross a safe path to get there, and then go around the cliff. With the mindset of never giving up, we started walking. Less than 10 minutes later, a strong gust of wind knocked me and the others over, and just as I was about to stand up, dust off the snow, and continue walking, someone behind me called out to the captain, "Captain!" One of the men had fallen into a pit and barely survived, and I rushed over and pulled him up before he fell to his death. We couldn't let our guard down. Even if we have paradise in front of us, the slightest slip of the guard is our annihilation. On the downhill, we descended slowly, and when we reached a flat area, we took a 10-minute break, and then we climbed. The path up was studded with trees. As soon as we got up there, we realized that something very bad had happened. No one was there. No researchers, no one from our team, no bodies, no body parts, no blood. We look inside. There's some of the first expedition's bags. There's some researchers' notes. But no one is there. It's as if they've evaporated into the air. Scattering from a base, we searched as many places as we could, 2 or 3 times, but no one, not a single body. I immediately went to the telecommunications department and connected to our base in the U.S., and fortunately, we have communication. This is Alpha. We're on base. One of the Institute's leaders greeted us. Lab, we're listening. There's no one here. There was a murmur through the comms. No one here, what does that mean? Our expedition is definitely not here. Nor are the researchers who were supposed to be here, but their luggage and research notes are. I see. It was frustrating, but what could they do? Even we in Antarctica don't know what to do, and the people waiting for us in the U.S. can't do anything about it. They sent us here, and that's the least they could do. I told my men to start searching the perimeters for any evidence. I stayed at the main base and started looking for clues, thinking that, like the Roanoke colony mystery, the crew must have left something related to their destination. Then I saw the transmitter again and decided to contact the bases of the other countries in Antarctica. I contacted the closest base to us, the Australian base. I say closest, but it's still about 100 kilometers away, and they responded but said that they hadn't seen any of the staff from this base, and that they were just as puzzled as we were because they hadn't heard back from anyone from this base. Next, I checked the call logs for calls made between the bases, and there were 27 in 2 days, all labeled as missed calls. The most recent one, within the confines of conversations, was a call from a UK base, which was answered by a call to the UK base, which was accepted after 20 seconds. I asked the same question if they knew the whereabouts of the staff at the US base, and they didn't know either. Just as I was about to call the next base, one of the explorers came to me with a terrified look on his face. "Captain, there's something here." I immediately put the phone down and followed the frightened ranger, anxiety overwhelming me. He led me to where the other rangers were looking at something. The bags from the first team were buried in the snow, and they weren't the only ones. Expedition gear, weapons, and even research journals were buried in the snow. The items I'd seen on the base weren't all that was on the base. It was starting to get dark, so I righted the bag and decided to investigate outside tomorrow. Dinner was eaten in silence. I thought something would be solved when I got to the base, but instead, more mysteries were created. Where is our expedition? Where are the researchers at the base? And why are there things scattered outdoors? As we were eating dinner and thinking, one of the expedition members saw one of the researchers' notebooks. "What is this?" He showed us the paper, and we saw a drawing on the ground of a creature that looked like something out of Cthulhu mythology, but even more bizarre, a giant that looked like a cross between a Yeti and a Davy Jones. It was a drawing, but the creature seemed to be staring at us. It was too good to be just a hobbyist drawing. It looked more of a diagram of something, I-8 diagram of a living thing. Just as we were trying to think, one of the expedition members shouted, "Oi!" He pointed his finger outward. We looked out and stood in shock. There are people running outside, and they are wearing the same clothes as us, the expedition we sent first. My team saw that they were being chased by something, so they armed themselves and headed outside. They asked me to explain the situation from above, so I stayed back at the base. I saw the men in red jammies heading down the hill toward them like that. I looked through the window, and the man with the gun suddenly looked back and started firing. And at the same time, a red light began to shine from the bottom of the valley. He stopped firing, and the other members of the expedition began to run away, and I saw 7 red-furred Yeti-like beings with luminous bodies were chasing them. Or perhaps charging is a better word than chasing. They were not chasing like humans, but charging like tigers and bears chasing animals. I saw the expedition member at the back fall. 2 of the 7 pounced on him and began pummeling his body as he fell to the ground. The screams of the member could be heard up to this point, and then suddenly the screams grew louder. No, the screams of many began to be heard. At the same time, other members of the expedition stopped in horror, and they too were seized by the beasts. I saw some of them struggling. The screams got louder and louder, and I couldn't tell which ones were ours. As they writhed in agony, a pit was summoned from beneath them, and as soon as it was summoned, I saw people swimming in fire and brimstone. As the pit grew larger, The screams of the damned echoed across the Antarctic. I gathered up my courage and decided to go outside and watch from the cliffside. The spirits of the damned are writhing in agony, some of them feeling a fate worse than death across the bay. In the center of the lava, a mighty, nay, towering being stands, and unlike the Yetis, he is red to the flesh. Like those creatures you see in the media that are used to depict demons? It was something like that, except looking even more diabolical than anything I have imagined. As the hole started to get closer, I thought of running. And just as my instinct told me to flee, I saw the Yetis dragging my companion into the fiery pits. The Yetis jumped in there like they felt no pain, while despite the screams of the fallen souls muffling my comrades, I could sense they were also in pain as well. That is all I remember about that day. The next thing I do remember was that I was approached by the Australian base members, who found me unconscious in the middle of the snow, surrounded by the items of the comrades. I didn't know what to tell them, but I first excused myself by saying that I must have accidentally fallen down the hill while looking for the missing people, because honestly, who would believe me? I headed back to base and sent a comm to the lab, telling them what happened right here, that I'd be back with proof of the supernatural, that they should look at the evidence and think about it before they thought I was crazy. The Australian base members said they would confiscate the base since it was effectively abandoned, and of course, I, not being part of the lab, could not argue. They escorted me to the harbor, and as I boarded the ship and left Antarctica, I swore never to return to this hellhole. It's been 4 months since I made that vow, and even now I worry about those who study Antarctica, but I worry more about those who have gone there themselves, for they do not know. That curiosity can lead them to hell. Fifth story. I went for a hunting trip to Nepal. There are creatures in the snowy forests of Kathmandu. My name is Imran. I am 23 years old and fresh out of college. During my days in college, I had accumulated enough money through part-time jobs and chores that I could go on an international trip, and that's exactly what did. I was an immigrant to the United States of America, but I had traveled enough across the USA to know about the culture and explore the western part of the world. I was looking for an adventure through which I would be able to explore other cultures. So I decided to take a 2-week-long trip to Kathmandu, Nepal. When I told my best friend, Luke, about it, he was really excited and asked me if he could come along. He insisted that he would pay for the next trip we went to, and I believed him because we were actually very close to each other, and he was a man of his words. We packed our stuff and planned out the whole trip. We were going to stay in a nice hotel, go hunting, go to Mount Everest, try Nepali booze, learn about their culture, and party like crazy. After we landed in Nepal, we headed straight to the hotel we would be staying in. For reasons of privacy, I will not be revealing the hotel's name. We explored Kathmandu for a few days. We went fishing, tried some Nepali booze, and did some other fun stuff. Now, only our final 5 days remained in Kathmandu, and only had 2 last tasks at hand. They were climbing the Mount Everest and going hunting. We decided to get the hunting out of the way quickly and then move on to the most climactic experience of our trip. Luckily enough, we had met some amateur hunters during the 5th day of our trip at the bar. The first one was Abesh. He seemed to be the leader of their hunting group. He was also the most experienced one amongst them. The second was Aryan. He was Abesh's younger brother. He was short and stout, unlike his brother who was tall and a bit muscular. The other 3 people assisted them while hunting. I can only recall the names of 2 of them, Dennis and Chaitan. The third one was socially awkward and did not speak much too. He didn't introduce himself, and others just called him Boy. We had exchanged numbers since they knew we would be going on a hunting expedition. We rang them up and asked them to prepare to go hunting near the forests of Mount Everest. It was a long, tedious path, but we were feeling adventurous. We started out our journey. at 8 p.m., hoping to reach there by 10 p.m. and possibly spot snow leopards, Arctic hares, snowy owls, and/or other such nocturnal creatures. And we definitely weren't coming back to our hotels without hunting down a Himalayan wild yak for the glory. When we reached there, it was almost 11. Since we were already a bit late, we split up to find yaks and photograph wildlife. Me and Luke made a bet. He thought he was going to get a kill before me. Me, Abesh, and Dennis formed one group, and Luke, Chaitan, Aryan, and the fifth guy formed the other. We set out on foot to hunt down yaks and photograph snow leopards. We were, of course, cautious. Abesh and Dennis held a rifle and a kukri each. Meanwhile, I had a pistol and a tranquilizer gun. We walked for 30 minutes, with no luck, but soon after the 30 minutes had passed, we noticed some movement. Through our night vision glasses, we saw what looked like a snow leopards chasing an ibex. I quickly took out my DSLR camera and took its pictures. Then we moved on, walking deeper and deeper into the snowy forests. We saw a herd of yaks grazing. This struck Abesh as odd, as yaks were not nocturnal creatures. But he decided we take one down anyway. We decided to take the biggest one down. We took our post irons. I had to fire the first bullet, a tranquilizer dart, to make it lose its balance. I was really excited. I took my aim and shot the dart. It hit the yak straight in the neck. It let out a blood-curdling roar and ran towards me. The other yaks just seemed to have disappeared in thin air. I climbed the nearest tree while Abesh and Dennis fired bullets at it. They seemed to have no effect on him. After Dennis had exhausted 50% of his ammunition, enough to kill at least 6 to 7 yaks. He threw an explosive at the yak. The enraged yak quickly turned its attention to Dennis, who now, running fast as he could, I got down from the tree and made a run to our Jeep. Not even 10 seconds after I'd climbed down the tree, I heard Dennis scream in pain. I turned around to see his body mangled. His skull was bust open, his organs exposed. His corpse lay there in a pool of blood. The yak was no longer present there. Me and Abesh stood there in shock. Before I could react, Abesh whispered under his breath, "The forest spirit. It's back. It's back." He fell to his knees and started chanting a prayer in his local dialect. His eyes started bleeding as he was lifted at least 20 feet above the ground. He looked at me and laughed like a maniac and let out a deafening scream before ripping his own throat out. The whole ordeal was so intense, I am not ashamed to admit that I wet myself. I ran to where Luke had potentially gone. I called out for him and kept my guard up the whole time. I heard Luke running and panting. He was calling out for me. I followed his voice, only to be led near a tree from which hung Luke, or what remained of Luke, and on the branches sat a bipedal, snow leopard-like creature with red, glowing eyes. It let out a demonic laughter as I ran. Weirdly enough, it did not follow or try to chase me, almost as if it was toying with me. On my way back from the forest to the Jeep, I caught up with Chaitan, who was already booking it to the Jeep. He ran up to me, hugged me, and broke down into tears. We sat in the Jeep and started driving away. When we heard spine-chilling roars coming from the forest, the roars were coming closer with every passing second. We realized very soon that it was the creature. It was chasing us. It was gaining on us. So I did something terrible because I wanted to live, something I regret to this day. Chaitan sat in the passenger seat without the seatbelt on. I opened his door and pushed him out of the vehicle straight into the jaws of the supernatural wild creature. This gave me enough time to drive away safely from the forests. At 4 a.m. in the morning, I reached my hotel. I went inside and took a cold shower. My brain's still processing what had just happened. I told some people about it, but no one believed me. So I decided to check out the photos of the snow leopard I took, and to my horror, I saw that creature with its glowing red eyes, chasing Luke. But wasn't an ibex it was chasing. It dawned on me. The creature was causing hallucinations and playing tricks on us all along. so there was a huge chance that he still had me believing that I was safe. The next day, when I tried to show the photo to other people, Luke and the creature were suddenly gone. All you could see in the photo was empty, snowy land. Since that day, I get night terrors and nightmares every time I sleep. I can see Chayton in my dreams, but he is not in a regular human form. His eyes are devoid of any emotions, and his skin have torn off his body. In every single dream, he come up to me and asks, "Imran, what did I do wrong?" Since that day, I have never slept for more than an hour at a time. The creature haunts all my dreams. I've tried to go to the Nepali authorities, but they just searched for 3 days and declared all of them missing. Even their corpses have not been found till now. I am writing this here because I just might end this. In it all, the pressure of carrying this secret for the rest of my life is too much. Sixth story. Biking stories around Yosemite National Park. I live in a small town in California, right outside of Yosemite National Park. I won't bother you with a name, but it's part of Tuolumne County, and it's right on the border of the center of YNP. Since there are a lot of forest roads leading into and going through Yosemite, I often take my bike down the roads just outside of the forest and sometimes within it. I'm in my mid-30s, and I'm an accomplished cyclist. In fact, I own several bikes, but the one I generally take into the forest is my baby, my Yeti SB 5C Baby. I absolutely love this bike. It's part of the reason I bike so much lately. Anyway, I'm getting off track from my main story. About 2 weeks ago, I started taking what I like to call high rides. For 2 reasons. 1, I smoke 2 bowls of Kush, and 2, I travel some of the more canyon-adjacent roads near my town. There are some terrific views from up there of Yosemite, and I've captured some amazing pics on my phone. The combination of nighttime and weed just makes the experience better and maybe a bit more dangerous, which I'll honestly say that I crave. Life shouldn't be boring, right? Well, anyway, the Friday before last, I was taking a high ride along a particular canyon road that is often frequented by young couples from a local high school. They'll often sneak up to these remote locations to have sex. This was another perk of my late-night rides, I'll admit, but it certainly wasn't my main attraction. This time, however, one couple caught my eye. They were acting a bit erratically compared to other couples I had seen. Most choose to park along the road, near one of the sparsely located houses in the woods. The people living in these houses would typically have floodlights to deter would-be thieves, and most couples choose a location that is nearby these lights for the safety of someone being able to hear them scream, if you will. Just an added layer of safety, which I totally understand. This particular couple, though, when they drove past me nearby one of these very houses, they slowed a bit, but didn't move over that much to pull around me. The guy was driving this clean, white Honda Civic, and the girl was in the seat next to him. Both of them looked perfectly normal. Nothing really strange or wrong with them. But they both stared at me with a sort of odd look in their eyes. I don't know. I can't place it exactly. It just creeped me out a bit. Anyway, the girl was kind of hot, so I shrugged it off and kept riding along after they had passed and sped up to continue further down the road. I thought it odd that they didn't want to be near the lights of the nearby house, but I figured maybe the guy was self-conscious about his looks around a girl who was so obviously out of his league. I mean, I could probably get with her, but he was no looker. So maybe you want a little more privacy. Who knows? I was too high to really care, and I was enjoying my night. That was until I saw their car about a half an hour later along a different canyon road. This time, the car was parked along the side of the road. The two seemed to be kissing at first, but then they suddenly moved away from one another, as though one of them had pushed the other away. As I slowly rode by and watched the scene, the girl gives me another stare as I pass. She doesn't say a word or move a muscle as I ride by, but the guy is still looking in her direction, apparently trying to talk to her. I thought it was strange, like maybe she needed help or something. But a moment later after I had passed the car, I saw their headlights turn on, and the car sped past me, nearly hitting my back tire if I hadn't swerved away at just the right second. I was a little ticked about that, but I was honestly more concerned than anything else. As the car sped past, I heard what I thought to be a girl scream, but I guess it could have just been the music, since it seemed to be loud as they passed. However, it weirded me out to think too much about it. Since I was still pretty high, I had stopped a few times to light up a pipe. So anyway, I kept on riding around. I had planned to return home pretty late, since I'm a grown-ass man, and I can handle myself in the wilderness just fine. I carry a decent-sized Bowie knife and a .9mm handgun in my backpack, just in case I come across some kind of bear or other wild animal in the forest. You never know, right? It's close to 11:30 p.m., and it's super dark by this point, since it's overcast but not raining. You can't see a single star in the sky, and the moon is pretty covered by dark clouds. I haven't seen a house in maybe 20 minutes or so, and it's pretty dark out, so I start trying to find the nearest location back to town. I've got an excellent GPS locator and decent cell reception on most of these roads, so I can generally find my way to a town quickly. Suddenly, I spot that same white Honda Civic in front of me. I see the couple again, this time not kissing, but just sitting in their seats, very still. This couldn't be a coincidence. Had they been following me? Had I somehow been following them without thinking about it? I mean, I was high sure, but I didn't remember seeing this car at all in the last 2 hours. How had I come across them again? I was freaking out a bit, but I calmed myself down as I slowly approached the vehicle on my bike. The couple didn't move at all as I approached them. The music was still playing rather loudly in their car, which was odd for their lack of motion at the time. The music got louder and louder as I approached, and I slowed my bike to as slow as I could ride it without toppling over. As I rode up next to the vehicle, I could hear that same eerie scream from before, as if from the girl, but it had to be the music, right? I turned to look over at the couple, and I met the girl's gaze. Her dead stare back at my face. Her jaw starting to drop as I'm hearing this scream, and then I black out. The next thing I remember, I'm riding my bike toward town. I can see lights in front of me and buildings ahead. I'm thinking, what just happened? How much time has passed? I look down at my watch, and I see that it's 3 a.m. in the morning. I blacked out for nearly 3 goddamn hours. At this point, I'm panicking. I'm trying to come up with some explanation as to my whereabouts. It's at this point that I notice the blood stain on my left jacket sleeve. I hadn't noticed it when I went to look at my watch, but when I grabbed my phone from my pocket, there it was. My sleeve had what was clearly blood splattered on it. A quick examination of the rest of my body after pulling over to the side of the road showed that my bike also had blood spatter, as well as my pants, torso, and shoes. I was nearly hyperventilating. I grabbed my bag, which is curiously clean, and I remember that I packed an extra set of clothes. I don't remember why I did that. I just remember thinking to myself, you'll need these, and putting them in there without thinking much more about it. Anyway, I changed out of the bloody clothes and put them into a trash bag I kept in there to keep some of my other items dry. It wasn't until after I was in clean clothes again that I checked my phone to see if there were any clues at all of where I had been in the last 3 hours, what I had been doing, and what was up with that couple in the white Honda Civic. At first, I didn't find anything. No missed calls, no voice messages, no social media updates, nothing. But then, I checked my pictures. That's when I made a chilling discovery. All my most recent pictures were of charred out, smoldering, white Honda Civic. There must have been at least 50 of them. Each was taken within 10 seconds of each other. I scrolled back through my photo timeline to reveal even more shocking and horrifying things. The further back I went on my pictures, the earlier in the night it got, and the more it became clear what had happened. The pictures revealed a man in a black hoodie, average height and build, walking calmly around the burning wreckage of what had clearly been the same white Honda Civic I had seen while on my high ride. What How did these pictures get on my phone? Who is this guy? Why would he be burning this car? I kept scrolling back, and with each new line of pictures, I fought to hold back the shock and panic I felt as the truth unfolded before my eyes. The car was not the only thing burning. Inside the car were 2 bodies, what appeared to be a young man and a young woman, bound and gagged, tied to their seats. They had a look of absolute terror on their faces as they were burned alive. I can't describe to you the gruesome scene as I discovered it in vivid detail on my phone's hundreds of photos, capturing the event live. But as I got further back in the timeline, I finally got to a point where the car was still burning, but the people appeared to be alive. At that point, the pictures stopped. However, before all of the pictures, there was one video. Even as I type this right now, I still cannot believe what the video contained. I am convinced that I have hallucinated the entire incident, and I'm not sure what is real anymore. I will recount to you what I remember, but take all of my information with a grain of salt. I may not be trustworthy. The video began with a hooded man speaking. Surprised, "Eric? The man knew my name? Well, you shouldn't be. This isn't the first time this has happened. Don't you remember?" "Remember what?" I asked myself. The video pans over to the car, showing the couple from that night bound inside their vehicle. I'm doing all of this to remind you of what you so often forget. Or maybe what you're so intent on burying. You can't escape from this, Eric. What was this guy talking about? I didn't even know who he was. Then, the man produced a gas can. "This is for you, friend." The man doused the car in gasoline until the can was empty and then set the car on fire on camera, with the couple still inside, trying to scream behind duct tape and wiggling in the thick ropes that bound them to their car seats. The video carried on for about 10 minutes as I watched in stunned horror, while their faces melted away before my eyes, and they thrashed about trying desperately to survive their inevitable fate. Then the man turned the video back to himself, his face shadowed by the hood. "Are you curious, Eric?" he asked perversely. Then he pulled down his hood to reveal his face. His face, it was my face, it was my face. "Don't you see, Eric? You've been hiding me all along. But you can't hold me back any longer. I want to come out to play." The man let out a maniacal kind of laugh. "Oh, don't worry. They'll never catch you, S. I've been very careful." The man chuckled a bit before the video cut off. I quickly checked my deleted photos and videos. I discovered that over the past month, I had been doing the same thing, every 2 or 3 nights or so. Only, I had deleted all the photos and videos. Apparently this man, or, I guess right? Me. I had been finding couples far away from the well-lit towns and houses around Yosemite. I had been stalking these couples, and I had been setting fire to their cars inside Yosemite National Park alongside the forest routes. I didn't look too far into the sets of pictures, but it looks like I had done this at least a dozen times. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know any details. I don't know who these people are. I don't know how all of this happened. I don't know why I've done all of this. I don't know who I am. I don't think I want to know. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.